They tried to chain humanity to Earth, said we weren't ready, said we were dangerous. And they were right. Before we dive into humanity's most explosive uprising yet, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more galaxy-shaking stories, and drop a comment with 888 if you stand with Earth. Now brace yourself. This isn't just war, it's vengeance. The child's skull burst like glass beneath a sledgehammer. Crimson mist blooming across the chamber of Concord as the alien executioner fired without hesitation. That single merciless act, broadcast to every corner of civilized space, was the spark. A spark that lit the fuse of Earth's oldest vengeance. Buried deep beneath mountain and ocean, sealed beneath time and secrecy, the great leviathans of war stirred. Ancient weapons born from humanity's darkest fears, awakened by betrayal. Commander Elias Thorne stood at the helm of the ESS Revenant, high above Earth's stratosphere. The screen before him soaked in light from the transmission. His fists clenched so tightly his gloves groaned. The face of Sarn Valak, the grotesque slaver of the Atari Dominion, leered on screen with rot-colored teeth and venom in his words. "The Council has decreed, your kind shall no longer roam among the stars," Valak snarled. "And for defiling our sacred monument, we have rendered judgment. Let this infant's death remind you, your species will obey or perish." And then the feed died. Elias barely breathed. His voice came as a broken thread of sound. They slaughtered a child. First Officer Naira Voss gripped the railing beside him, her knuckles bone white. "Awaiting your command, sir." Fire, not rage, but something older, lit Elias's eyes. A frostbitten resolve. He turned toward the crew, every face locked on him. "Light the War Core. Ready the Rift drives. Set our course for Sindara Prime. We burn the Council tonight." This was the hour Earth had feared and planned for, when diplomacy would rot and masks would fall, when the oppressors would bare their true teeth and Earth would answer with steel. The Council had broken sacred law. Now came the reckoning. Now came the return of the fleet. Tucked within the jagged veins of the Krellspire Range, stone split like bone under pressure. Vast iron gates, invisible to all but a chosen few, hissed open with age-old hydraulics. Elias marched into the dark, shadows following his command unit like specters of history. They passed through concrete arteries, dimly lit by dying bulbs, the silence broken only by the steady march of boots and the distant rumble of awakening machines. They reached the end. Before them, a door of myth, a steel slab 5 feet thick, untouched by time. Elias stepped forward, pressed his hand to the DNA seal. A chime echoed. Gears roared. The wall shuddered. It opened. The chamber beyond swallowed sound. A hangar vast as legend, cloaked in ancient dust and silence. Elias flipped the breaker. Light cascaded across the tomb of giants. And there they stood, rows upon rows of sleeping titans, their hulls woven from starlight and forgotten metals, reflecting colors the eye couldn't name. The time of hiding was over. The old gods of war had awakened. Under the glare of floodlights, the ships looked like predatory beasts carved from obsidian, razor-edged, silent, hungry. Their angles whispered of speed, of violence, of vengeance long delayed. None among the officers had ever seen warcraft like these, not even in their darkest dreams. Captain Thorne turned slowly, his gaze ironclad, voice like thunder wrapped in stone. "Gentlemen," he said, "meet the Nyx Armada, conceived in the shadows during humanity's first uncertain steps into deep space. Hidden, buried, until the day would come when words would fail and war would speak. That day is now." Lieutenant Voss stepped toward the nearest hull, fingertips brushing the surface. Her eyes widened. "I always thought the Nyx was just a legend, a ghost story told in flight school." Elias shook his head. They were never ghosts, just sleeping titans. And now they wake. He swept his hand toward the hangar, where ship after ship gleamed like starlight forged into blades. "They caged us on Earth. thought the leash would hold. They never imagined we had already built the key. This is our answer. While the council basked in arrogance, we advanced a century ahead in secret. The officers exchanged solemn glances, resolve settling into their bones like iron. Not one spoke. They didn't have to. Elias turned, uniform crisp, jaw unshaken. He marched toward the lead dreadnought, the others falling in behind without hesitation. "The galaxy has forgotten what we're capable of," Elias said, voice echoing off steel and concrete. "Let's remind them. Humanity kneels to no one." He paused beneath the shadow of the ship's prow. "They murdered our child, mocked our mourning. Today, we answer with fire. Today, we show them what happens when you break humanity's heart." And then, with voices still and hearts burning, they entered the ships that would change the stars. Across the cosmos, on the gilded world of Virexel, High Regent Karkle reclined lazily on a floating chaise draped in jeweled silks. His heavy-lidded eyes watched the sunset filter through crystalline walls. He lifted a goblet filled with luminous blue liquor and let it slide down his throat with practiced detachment. The drink could melt alloy. He barely tasted it. A chime rang, and the translucent wall bloomed with a holoscreen. The face of his aide, Rinval, materialized, normally pale and unreadable, now flushed violet with barely contained alarm. "Regent, we've detected a massive fleet entering our territory. Unregistered. Fast." Karkle flicked his hand, rings catching a light. "Dispatch a wing. Probably some fringe world primitives playing conqueror." Rinval hesitated, swallowing hard. "The intercept team's gone. Sir, they were annihilated the instant they entered range. We didn't even have time to. No visual yet, sir. They were vaporized before telemetry caught a single frame." Regent Karkle sat bolt upright, his goblet tilting, blue fire wine spilling over his silken robe. His voice was sharp and unsteady. "Vaporized? By what? What are they using?" He stormed across the chamber, stepping barefoot over polished obsidian tiles to a golden-laid control terminal embedded in the wall. His fingers danced across the glowing interface. With a low hum, the lights dimmed. A spherical projection surged to life, an enormous star map of the Draxel Reach, its center dominated by a cerulean orb, Verax Prime, the Oran homeworld. But it was not the calm that caught his eye. It was the red swarm rushing toward it. Dozens, no hundreds, of unknown contacts, lighting up the void like a tidal wave of fury. Karkle's throat dried. He stared as if the numbers might change. How is that possible? How could any rogue power field a fleet this vast without our knowledge? A cold, skeletal dread clawed through his insides. And then clarity. A suspicion sharp as glass stabbed into his thoughts. He turned slowly toward the trembling holoscreen where Rinval still waited, wide-eyed. "Tell me everything. I want a full tactical breakdown, formations, weapons, propulsion, metallurgy. Don't miss a single detail." His voice was steady now, but only on the surface. Beneath it, his heart pounded like a war drum. Because if he was right, if that buried fear was real, then this wasn't just an attack. It was judgment. And it was earned. Rinval swallowed, his voice brittle. "The ships are angular aerodynamic. Stealth-designed, but not stealth-dependent. They fly with frightening unity. Formations like choreography. Scans can't penetrate the outer alloy. It's refractive, layered, almost organic. We've never seen it before." Karkle didn't interrupt, eyes locked on the swarm. "And the weapons?" Plasma lances pierced shielded cruisers in seconds. Missiles with nanite guidance that adapt mid-flight. They move faster than our sensors can lock. But that's not all. Rinval's voice dipped into a whisper. "There's a beam, some kind of phase burn. It slices through armor like a surgeon's scalpel. We lost 5 destroyers in under a minute. Not wrecked, disassembled." But it wasn't the weapons that hollowed Karkle's breath. It was the symbol, the one projected on every bow. A black, twin-ringed insignia surrounding a crimson shard. A mark burned into galactic nightmares. The Hellion crest. He knew it. Every species knew it, even if only in old war songs and forgotten warnings. The humans. But they were no longer explorers, no longer diplomats. They had returned wearing the skin of conquerors, armed with a science that bent the rules of reason, wielding justice like a blade. Karkle staggered back from the display, his pulse a thunderstorm in his veins. Images flashed in his mind, the boy crying, silenced by his decree on the council floor. He had pulled the trigger, and now the retribution was coming. And there would be no mercy. Now they all understood. And now his people would bleed for his arrogance. As the Hellion armada approached, Regent Karkle stared into the void and wondered, was there anything in existence that could halt this storm? He already knew the answer. On the command screen, his eyes stretched wide, lips trembling open and closed in stunned silence. His taloned hands clamped the arms of his throne chair so tightly the metal groaned beneath the pressure. Commander Elias Thorne didn't give him time to breathe. The regent's frame seemed to shrink, shoulders folding inward like a collapsing monument. When he spoke, it was barely a whisper. "What do you want, human?" Thorne leaned in, voice cold and carved from stone. "Balance." His eyes narrowed, drilling through the projection. The blockade ends. Immediately, the Hellion Accord is reinstated. Humanity's right to roam the stars will be honored, and any strike against Earth or her colonies will be answered with force, swift, absolute, and final. Karkle's flared nostrils twitched. Pride surged like bile against the fear rising in his gut. "You speak as if the galaxy belongs to you," he spat. "You are one species. You don't have the power to dictate terms to us all." Elias didn't reply. He simply nodded to Ensign Dareth, who tapped a key. The screen split. Karkle's image shrank into the corner as a new feed took over, showing the remains of a Velk's dreadnought, its hull twisted into molten ribbons, drifting lifeless through the dark. But it wasn't the ruin that stole Karkle's breath. It was the movement around it. Hundreds, thousands of razor-sharp interceptors poured from the Nyx Armada's internal bays, flooding the void like hornets unleashed. They twisted and danced with impossible agility, darting between laser fire as if physics bowed to their will. Then they struck. Lances of blinding sapphire plasma carved through Velk's armor like paper, turning sleek cruisers into smoldering wrecks. Missiles with serpentine trails spiraled into hulls with thunderous impact. Directed beams sliced straight through engine cores, rupturing entire decks in a single pulse. Return fire from the Velk ships was chaotic, erratic. Their systems failed to lock. Targeting was useless. Their weapons flailed at ghosts. The fighters' hulls shimmered with refractive armor that made them vanish from tracking arrays. Within moments, over a third of the Velk's fleet was floating ruin. The rest scattered, screaming into comms, orders clashing, formation shattered, discipline undone. It was a massacre. And still, the main ships of the Nyx Armada held back, watching, weapons charged but still idle. The fighters alone were more than enough. Thorne turned back to Karkle, face carved from stone. "This is your final offer, Regent. Stand down or watch everything burn." Karkle slumped. His hands fell from the armrests. He glanced around his bridge, the faces of his crew pale and still. The truth had found them all at once. They had made a mistake they might never live long enough to undo. They had misjudged humanity, and now they were bleeding for it. With a trembling breath, Regent Karkle reached forward and severed the communication link. The holoscreen snapped to black, swallowing the image of Commander Thorne. On board the ESS Revenant, Elias turned to Commander Voss, his gaze unblinking, voice steel-wrapped. "Signal the fleet. Stand ready, but hold fire. Give them one chance." Voss gave a tight nod and relayed the command. Across the battle group, weapons primed, but held. No one spoke. The bridge was hushed, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Eyes locked on the tactical display, red and blue signals frozen in confrontation. Then it began. The red icons flickered. One by one, the Velk's warships dimmed, disarmament protocols activating, reactors powering down, engines cut, weapons silenced. They were surrendering. The bridge erupted in cheers. Crew members leapt from their stations, fists thrown into the air, handshakes and laughter echoing through the command deck. They had done it. Humanity had brought the galaxy's highest order to its knees. But Elias didn't move. He stared at the map, his face as still as ice. He knew this was no victory parade. The humiliation the Council had just suffered would not be forgotten. Not easily. Retaliation would come, through back channels, through warfare cloaked in treaties, through assassins and propaganda. The road ahead would not be paved with triumph, but with fire. Still, this moment mattered. This was the spark. Humanity had cast off the shackles. No more begging for a place at the table. No more living as outcasts in a galaxy they helped build. Today they had roared. Today they had won. And may the stars have mercy on whatever power tried to cage them again. On board the command ship Vraxel's teeth, Karkel's breath came shallow. His eyes darted across the command matrix, blinking glyphs and cascading alerts blurring into chaos. The human vessels had disappeared, completely off the grid. But Karkel knew. They were still there, waiting, watching. Predators in the dark. He slammed a clawed hand against the console, his voice thundering in the harsh, guttural dialect of his species. Form perimeter. Encircle them. Crush them before they vanish again. Across the Velk's fleet, the order echoed. Capital ships groaned into motion, engines howling under the strain. They expanded into a web, casting a sphere of warships, an iron net meant to snare ghosts. Weapons charged, their hulls bristling with fire. On the Revenant, Thorn leaned into his command chair, watching with amused detachment. "Trying to trap us," he muttered. Beside him, Dareth frowned at the display. "They're boxing us in. Cut off tactics. Should we pull back?" Thorn smiled. "No. Let them think they're in control." He stood, eyes burning with anticipation. "Let's remind them what humans do when you back them into a corner." He reached for the comms. "Engage IPS full power." Fleet-wide broadcast, Elias Thorn commanded. "Initiate Phantom Protocol." A chorus of confirmations rang through the comm channels like ritual chants. Then, on the main display, something uncanny unfolded. The ships of the Nyx Armada shimmered, edges warping, their forms flickering like reflections in broken glass. One by one, they dissolved into the black until there was nothing left but void. Sensors registered silence. Visuals returned only static. They were gone. Specters in the dark. On board the Vraxel's teeth, Regent Karkel reeled backward, eyes bulging at the flickering screens. His officers erupted in chaos, alarms blared, warning glyphs flashed blood red. The battlefield was empty. Impossible. Karkel howled, but the word was still on his tongue when reality tore itself open. A massive shockwave threw him across the command deck as the flagship convulsed under a brutal, unseen strike. Sparks spat from shattered terminals. Power conduits blew out in sprays of molten metal. The floor lurched like a wounded beast beneath their feet. And all across the Velk's formation, it was the same. Ships ignited mid-space, ripped apart by kinetic impacts that came without warning, without origin. Fire bloomed in the abyss like hellflowers, consuming cruisers and destroyers in flashes of silent fury. Shield systems flared, then failed. Hulls buckled. Weapons arrays shattered before they could fire. Karkel staggered to the forward viewport, clutching a support beam, twin hearts hammering against his ribs. Outside, he saw his fleet, his legacy, being torn apart by ghosts. Each attack was surgical, deliberate. every strike fatal. Back on the Revenant, Thorn stood unmoved, watching the carnage unfold with an expression carved from ice. Let them feel it, the despair, the powerlessness, the very same fear they had dealt to others for centuries. Let them witness the cost of their arrogance. Cease fire, he said finally. And like the eye of a storm swallowing itself, the barrage stopped. Only silence remained. The Velk's fleet, once a wall of power, was now a graveyard. Blackened wreckage drifted where warships once stood proud. Screaming comms had gone quiet. There were no orders left to give. Thorn turned to the comm screen. Karkle stared back, broken, his breath shallow, his command deck drenched in ruin. Thorn's voice was low and unforgiving. Look well, Regent. Gaze upon the ashes of your armada. This is what remains of your might. His eyes narrowed. You held the life of a child like it was nothing. And now, I hold the soul of your people in the palm of my hand. He leaned closer, his image dominating the screen. I want you to feel this, Karkle. That terror in your bones? That's the shadow of extinction. That is how close you stand to being erased. And then he smiled, a cold, merciless twist of the lips. But not today. He stepped back. You live. For one reason. To carry the warning. Go. Tell your council what happened here. Make them understand. The age of subjugation is over. The Dominion is finished, Elias Thorn declared, his voice echoing like thunder through the bridge. Humanity bows no longer. The chains are broken. Our place among the stars is not begged for, it's taken. He raised one hand in a mock blessing, voice dipped in contempt. Go now, Karkle. Crawl back to your council, tail tucked. Pray that if we meet again, I am in a merciful mood. For your sake and the survival of your kind. The screen cut to black. Karkle sat in silence, the taste of ash thick on his tongue. The stars themselves felt colder. The galaxy had changed today, and he had lit the match. On board the SS Revenant, Thorn gave a brief nod. The feed vanished, Karkle's broken expression replaced by the quiet glow of deep space. He turned to his crew, expression hard. This is only the beginning, he said. The Council will retaliate. Hard. With every weapon they can muster. At the NAV station, Dareth looked up from his readouts, concern in his voice. If they rally the other species, even the Nyx Armada might be overwhelmed. We've got the edge in tech, sir, but not in numbers. Thorn gave a grim nod, his mind already racing through contingencies. Then we changed the board. Helm, plot a jump to the Kael'var expanse. Maximum burn. The bridge crew exchanged uncertain looks, but there was no hesitation. Fingers flew over controls. The floor hummed. The stars outside bent into long silver trails as the fleet leapt into hyperspace. Thorn gathered his senior officers in the strategy chamber. Holographic light bathed their faces in shifting cobalt. The Kael'var Nebula lies in Voran space. Once they were warriors, fierce, proud. Before the Council crushed them. Now they mine, or for starships they'll never touch. He paused, letting the weight settle. Our sources say they're on the brink of revolt. If we act fast, we turn slaves into soldiers. We get the manpower we need. Moments later, the fleet emerged from hyperspace. The nebula stretched before them, vast, electric with hues of violet and cobalt. Gas clouds shifting like ocean tides. Sensor alerts pinged across the bridge. Dozens of Voran mining platforms ahead, each under the boot of Council enforcers. Thorn's eyes narrowed. Drop cloak. All ships, unveil. The fleet shimmered into existence, monoliths of metal and fury. The moment they appeared, chaos erupted. Council vessels scrambled, fleeing like startled insects. Engines flared. Transmissions screamed retreat. And on the platforms, thousands of Voran laborers looked up, first in confusion, then in awe. Hope long buried began to stir in their eyes. As the last enemy cruiser fled the system, Thorn stepped to the viewport, staring into the nebula. They had come not just to fight. They had come to raise an army. Thorn opened a secure channel to the largest of the outposts. A moment later, a face appeared, leathery and battle-worn, scales dulled by age and old wounds. The Voran commander squinted through the screen, distrust coiled in every line of his posture. "I am Commander Elias Thorn of Earth," Elias said. "We've come to offer you a chance to rise, and to take vengeance on those who made your kind kneel." The Voran narrowed his gaze, voice dripping with suspicion. "Humans, you're infants among the stars. What makes you think you can deliver what generations of warriors could not?" Thorn said nothing. Instead, he transmitted the recording. His confrontation with Regent Karkle, the annihilation of the Velk's fleet, the ghost ships that turned giants into wreckage. As the feed played, the Voran's expression shifted. Confusion giving way to awe, hardening into something savage. By the end, his golden eyes gleamed with hunger. "You've shown teeth, Earther," he growled. "So tell me, what's your ask?" Thorn leaned closer, voice low and unshakable. "An alliance. Fight with us. Help us tear down the Council, not just for Earth, but for every world they've crushed beneath their boots." The Voran chieftain barked a laugh, grating, brutal. "You've got yourself a pact, Thorn. The Voran will ride with you, and together we'll drink the Council's fear like fire wine." The feed went dark. Elias turned to his officers. A blaze kindled in his stare. "The pieces are in motion. Ready the fleet." It was time. The Helian Voran armada ripped from hyperspace at the edge of the Council's heartlands, a system thick with commerce planets, political strongholds, and orbital strongholds glittering like a fortress crown. Immediately, the void screamed to life, defense sirens, tactical pings, and burning red alerts. The Council's war engines roared awake. A perimeter formed, tight, enormous. Dozens of planetary defense rings. Hundreds of capital-class warships. They had recalled their military from across the stars. The entire strength of the Galactic Order had converged. Aboard the ESS Revenant, Thorn stood before the viewport, his jaw tight. "They've pulled everything," he murmured. "Every ship, every fleet. They've bet it all on this line." At tactical, Dareth grimaced. "Even with the Voran, we're outgunned. Heavily. If we go head-on, we won't make it through." Elias gave a grim nod. "Which is why we won't." He keyed the fleet-wide comm. His voice rolled across ships like thunder. "All vessels, commence Phase 1. Instantly, the formation shifted. Human and Voran ships didn't charge the Council wall. They scattered in a wide arc, hugging the system's outer rim. They weren't coming for the front. They were circling the throat. Elias Thorn pointed to the holographic display, a massive installation nestled in high orbit, bristling with sensors and communication pylons. "That's their central relay hub," he said. "It's how they monitor system-wide movement, issue commands, track us in real time. We take that out, they go blind." As the Helian Voran armada closed in, the Council's guard vessels surged forward, an intercept line of cruisers and command frigates. But just as they prepared to fire, something fractured. The Helion ships shimmered and multiplied. Each vessel splintered into dozens of ghost images, swarming the screen like a wave of phantoms. The Council scanners screamed with false returns, their targeting systems flooded with noise. Confusion rippled across their formation. And then, too late, they realized the truth. The real ships had already broken through, cloaked in the chaos. Fire erupted across the void. The skies around the station ignited in a maelstrom, plasma bursts, laser trails, and magnetic detonations colliding in a savage ballet. The Council forces fought back with fury, but their fire was scattered, disoriented, outclassed. The Voran tore into them like wolves unchained. Within minutes, the station's defense grid collapsed. Its outer plating peeled away under relentless fire. Finally, a barrage of Helion phase torque torpedoes struck its core. The installation vanished in a silent bloom, an expanding sphere of molten debris. Across the system, the result was immediate. Council command channels went dead. Their tactical grid fractured. Messages became static. Commands gibberish. The tide turned. Hellion and Voran forces drove in with clinical precision, striking starship foundries, weapons platforms, fuel silos. Every target was chosen to bleed the Council where it hurt most. On the ESS Revenant, Thorn watched their tight defensive circle break apart. Phase 1 complete, he said. Initiate Phase 2. The Armada regrouped, no longer skirting the enemy line, but turning to face it head-on. Weapons charged. Engines flared. And then they surged forward. Thorn opened a channel to the Council's lead battleship. This is Commander Elias Thorn of the Hellion Vanguard. Your eyes are closed. Your flanks are bleeding. Your fleet is crumbling. Surrender now, and you may yet see another dawn. Silence. Then, the screen flared to life. Regent Karkel's twisted visage filled the feed, hatred spilling from his every pore. We will never kneel to you, mongrel. We will burn to the last ship, to the last breath. Thorn's jaw tensed. He gave a single nod. So be it. The channel went dead. He turned to his officers. Signal the fleet. No quarter. End this. The combined force of humanity and its newfound allies plunged into the heart of the Council's war machine. The void shattered with light. Fury met resistance, beams and detonations weaving across space in a deadly tapestry. The Revenant trembled under impact, shield shrieking. On screen, a Hellion destroyer vanished in flame, its hull pierced by a Council siege cannon. A Voran warcruiser returned fire. Retribution had begun. Trailing flame and torn hull plating, a Voran interceptor plowed straight into a Council corvette. The collision lit the stars with a blinding pulse. Two ships vaporized in a final act of shared destruction. Focus fire on their command echelon, Thorn commanded, voice steel. We take the head, the body dies. The Hellion formation shifted like a living blade, with the ESS Revenant at its tip. They surged forward toward the cluster of Council flagships. Enemy vessels scrambled to defend their leaders, unleashing wave after wave of plasma fire to break the advancing spear. The sky filled with burning light. A Council dreadnought, its hull scorched and cratered, moved into their path, its gravitic artillery pounding the Revenant shields. The deck rocked under each impact. Reroute full power to forward shielding and weapon arrays. Thorn shouted through smoke and static. Explosions showered the command deck. Sparks danced across the floor. Dareth, give me a vulnerability. At tactical, Dareth's fingers raced across the console. There, fluctuation in their AR field. Vector Gamma, 6-1-5. Thorn didn't hesitate. Bring us around, lock on and fire. The Revenant pivoted sharply, its prow leveling with the dreadnought's stern. A breath later, twin barrels erupted, torrents of ion-laced plasma spearing across the Gulf. Silence. Then the enemy ship convulsed, metal groaning as pressure ruptures snaked along its hull. A cascade of internal detonations roared through the vessel. In seconds, the warship tore open, its heart consumed by a reactor implosion. Through the swirling wreckage, Thorn saw it. The Council Prime, Karkel's command barge, a behemoth clad in reinforced armor, bristling with artillery. The seat of the old regime's authority, and its pride. Thorn's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward. All squadrons converge. Bring that throne crashing down. The Hellion and Voran fleets hurled themselves into the remnants of the Council's lines. Every weapon blazed. Particle beams shredded hulls. Missiles twisted through vacuum and struck like thunder. Council fires struck back, but their lines were unraveling. Technology outpaced, discipline broken. For every Hellion ship lost, 5 of the enemy fell. At the storm center, the Revenant and the Council Prime exchanged punishing blows. Each salvo flayed armor, melted decks, and boiled exposed metal. Lances of superheated energy connected the two titans, crackling like the breath of dying gods. On the Revenant's bridge, another console blew, Dareth barely diving aside as fire spewed across the bulkhead. Thorn gripped his chair, knuckles white, as the ship shuddered from stem to stern. He barked orders. The guns replied. A final, merciless barrage ripped into the Council Prime's engine core. Its shields collapsed. Flame erupted from its stern, and the flagship began to die. The Council Prime began to spiral, plasma venting from its shattered engines, fragments of plating peeling off like burning leaves. But its death throes were not yet complete. A final charge surged through its spine. Its main weapon, a colossal singularity beam array, fired one last time. The Revenant's forward shields erupted in blinding light, then vanished as the particle lance slammed into the bow, carving through armored decks like molten lightning. Bulkheads vaporized. Entire sections ceased to exist. The bridge erupted. A power conduit burst, raining fire and twisted metal. Consoles detonated. Crew members were thrown like ragdolls. Commander Thorn hit the floor hard, vision swimming, blood trailing from a deep cut above his brow. Alarms howled. Smoke filled the air. Reports poured in. Breaches on multiple decks. Primary weapons offline. Engines at 14%. The Council Dreadnought wasn't finished. It circled the wounded Revenant, hammering it with punishing precision. Each hit shook the bones of the ship. Thorn could only grip the arm of his chair and watch his vengeance slip through his fingers. And then, salvation screamed from the dark. A phalanx of Voran fire cruisers, witnessing the Revenant's desperate state, broke ranks and surged forward. Their hulls streaked with tribal glyphs, their weapons hot with fury. They descended on the Council Dreadnought like predators unleashed. The alien flagship's defenses, already strained from its duel with the Revenant, buckled under the Voran's storm of fire. Beams and plasma shells raked its flanks. Explosions stitched across its superstructure as the Voran struck key systems with brutal accuracy. Missiles impacted its drive core. The Invincible was now just another ruin. The Dreadnought listed and finally went still, powerless, burning, dead. A broken husk. On the shattered bridge of the Revenant, a ragged cheer erupted. Thorn sagged into his chair, bloodied and barely upright, but breathing. He surveyed the stars beyond the smoke-filled viewport. The Council's fleet, stunned by the destruction of its twin pillars, its command ship and its dreadnought, was in retreat. Fragmented. Disoriented. "Ceasefire," Thorn rasped. "Begin rescue ops. And get me a damage report immediately." He let his eyes close for a second, just a second. "We've won the day, but the war's far from done." In the stillness that followed, the Revenant drifted, its armor torn, sections vented to space, its glory marred by survival. Inside, engineering crews sprinted through ruined corridors, sealing breaches, bypassing burned conduits, and bringing systems back to life. On the bridge, Thorn and his chief engineer leaned over a cracked display. "Route all remaining power to drone repair systems," Thorn said. "Hull and engines, top priority." Beyond the viewport, the rest of the armada limped into formation. Many ships bore deep scars from the engagement. Some barely held together. The Voran vessels, angular and painted with symbols of honor, docked with the Revenant. Their warriors spilled onto the hangar decks, rowdy, exultant. Celebration ignited. Blades clashed in salute. Mugs overflowed with searing, iridescent liquor. Even the human crew, battered and weary, found themselves swept into the storm of triumph. The hangar echoed with celebration, voices loud, boots stomping, weapons clashing in triumph. Laughter erupted as warriors of two worlds exchanged tales of blood and fire. Humans and Voran stood shoulder to shoulder, covered in soot and scars, bonded by victory. But even in the heat of that victory, unease began to stir. crackling with static. Urgent messages flooded into the Revenant's comm relays. The ship's AI flagged them one after another. High-priority alerts from across the quadrant. Commander Thorne's celebration soured. His expression darkened as he summoned his senior officers to the war room. The holotable pulsed to life, casting a ghostly blue over the tense faces gathered around it. "We're getting simultaneous transmissions from dozens of sectors," Thorne said, voice taut. With the Council's main fleet decimated and their communications crippled, the balance is shifting. Fast. He gestured to the holographic map. Worlds once bound in silence now flared with signs of revolt. Fires of rebellion spreading like lightning through dry brush. "Entire civilizations," he murmured, rising up in defiance. Commander Dareth leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "Sir, this is our moment." They're staggered. "If we strike now, with precision, we could bring the entire council structure crashing down." Thorne gave a sharp nod, then turned to General Trax, the grizzled Voran warlord with a cruel scar carved from chin to brow. "Your people have waited lifetimes for justice. Will you stand with us as we deliver the final blow?" Trax bared jagged teeth in a brutal smile. "The Voran are ready, Thorne. Our knives are keen. Our blood sings for vengeance. Just say the word." Thorne rose from the table, his voice iron. "Then it's decided. We strike their bastions simultaneously, divide their forces, crush their command structure, and sever the last heads of this snake." The commanders dispersed, each racing to brief their fleets and rally their warriors for what would be the final reckoning. As the room cleared, a sharp ping echoed from Thorne's private terminal. A secure channel blinked. He stepped into a shadowed alcove and keyed it open. The hollow-eyed face that appeared sent a chill through his veins. It was Agent Revell, deep undercover in Council territory. His face was drawn, haunted. Every breath looked like it might be his last. "Commander," he whispered, eyes flicking around nervously. "Zarek, he's alive." Thorne stiffened. The Council's High Executor? He was aboard their command ship. We saw it burn. Revell shook his head. He escaped. No idea how. But he's regrouping. And worse, he has a weapon. Something ancient. Cataclysmic. They say it can crack entire star systems like glass. Thorne's jaw locked, his knuckles pale. "Understood," he growled. "Maintain surveillance." The moment the call ended, the Revenant leapt into hyperspace. Stars streaked across the viewports like falling comets. And Commander Thorne watched them vanish, silent as steel, knowing that their greatest battle had yet to begin. They were headed for a shadowed corner of the galaxy, where no maps marked and no warnings sufficed. A fortress, ancient, fortified, bristling with planetary defenses. Deep within its labyrinthine depths, Zarek, the fallen High Executor, was said to be hiding, cradling a weapon capable of unmaking entire star systems. A device of legend, a god-killer. The mission ahead was nothing short of suicidal. Yet as Commander Thorne studied the faces around him, faces steeled by war, forged in fire, he found that faint glimmer of stubborn hope. These weren't soldiers. They were humanity's finest edge, wielded in its darkest hour. The Revenant dropped from hyperspace at the edge of the nebula-shrouded sector, just beyond the reach of the Council base's sensor web. "Begin Ghost Shroud," Thorne ordered. "Aye, Commander," replied his tactical officer. Not even a ripple. The ship shifted, its surface cloaking itself in energy-dampening plates, magnetic baffles activating across its hull. They slid beneath the shadow of a fractured moon, swallowed by darkness. Thorne moved to the armory. His strike unit waited there, 11 in total. Veterans of campaigns that never made the history books. They stood silent as he entered, running final diagnostics on plasma lances, disruptor charges, and graph-chained armor. He moved down the line, looking each in the eye. "We know what lies at the end of this corridor," he said quietly. "A weapon that can erase suns. If Zarek triggers it, everything ends." He placed a gauntlet hand on the shoulder of his demolitions expert. But we're not here to fail. Not today. Not ever. No cheers followed, just nods. Grim final. They understood the cost. As the Revenant stalked closer through the void, the Council Fortress came into view, a monolith of obsidian alloy and fire-lit battlements. Miles across, buried in overlapping shield grids and missile arrays. Thorn's skin prickled. Somewhere in that sprawl of steel and secrets, Zarek was waiting, with a finger hovering over the void. But today, that hand would be severed. On the bridge, the command crew operated in complete silence. The air was thick with the weight of what was coming. Approaching outer perimeter, called the pilot. Uncloak, the tactical officer asked. Negative, Thorn replied. Arm the scythe pulse. Stand by. Outside, the stealth plating of the Revenant shimmered as capacitors along its spine charged to full capacity. Then, now, fire. A spear of electric blue energy erupted from the bow of the vessel. The scythe pulse, a directed EMP blast of terrifying power, raced forward like a spectral tsunami. In a single breathless moment, every turret, drone, and scanner aboard the Council base flickered, then died. The fortress had been blinded, and the time for reckoning had begun. The fortress fell silent, its defenses crippled, power lines crackling with dying sparks. Move. Now, Commander Thorn bellowed, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. Metallic breaching capsules slammed into the stronghold's flanks, folding open as plasma cutters hissed and sliced through alloy like it was parchment. The strike team poured out into the dim corridors beyond, ghosts with guns. Alarms howled through the labyrinthine halls. Red strobes pulsed in jagged rhythms. The Council's elite sentinels surged forward to intercept, armored shadows in shimmering battleskin. Then came the clash. Bolts of searing plasma ripped through the air, sizzling past heads and limbs. The reek of ionized air mingled with scorched metal and burning flesh. Thorn was a blur of controlled fury, his rifle barking cobalt flame as he advanced, his unit tight behind him, every motion rehearsed in fire and death. The deeper they drove into the base, the more resistance they encountered. The guards came in waves, disciplined, savage, endless. For every one that dropped, two more seemed to rise from the smoke. Thorn ducked as a bolt screamed past his ear, the heat singing the edge of his helmet. He dropped low and returned fire. 3 quick pulses that turned a defender into slag. To his right, Lieutenant Rail grappled with a towering brute, the two locked in a desperate, thrashing struggle. To his left, Private Inari screamed, her leg mangled by a wild shot, blood pooling beneath her. Still, the team pressed forward, driven by raw will and the knowledge that if they failed, there would be no tomorrow. They carved a path of ruin through the enemy, their bodies battered but spirits unbroken. At last, they reached it, the inner sanctum. A towering blast door stood before them, plated in black obsidian alloy. Cold, imposing, final. Thorn wasted no time. He slapped an explosive ring onto the door center, stepping back with a grim breath. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The corridor erupted. Thunder, smoke, a shockwave that cracked the walls and drowned out thought. Before the last echo faded, Thorn surged through the breach, weapon up, eyes scanning. Inside, the nerve center of the installation, monitors flickered, control glyphs danced, and at the heart of it all, hunched over a command terminal, stood Zarek, once high executor, now butcher-in-chief of the old regime. His face curled into a twisted sneer as he saw Thorn. One clawed hand hovered over a pulsating control orb. "You're too late," he hissed, voice thick with venom. "With a single press, I erase your precious Earth." All of it burned to star ash. Thorn raised his rifle, steady as iron. "It ends now, Zarek. Step away." But the alien only laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "You think you've won? You think your little firestorm matters?" His hand inched toward the orb. "The Council's reign is eternal, and I will see it reborn in flame. If I must burn 1,000 stars to resurrect the Council, so be it." Zarek's clawed hand slammed down on the activation pad, the sound sharp and final, echoing like a death knell through the room. Silence. No alarms. No tremors. No blinding cascade of power. Nothing. Zarek's face twisted into confusion, disbelief clawing into his features. He pounded the controls again and again, desperation mounting with each failed press. His movements grew erratic, wild. He turned, eyes burning with rage, to face Commander Thorn. A calm, grim smile curled Thorn's lip. "You really thought we'd walk into your lair without a plan?" His voice was quiet, razor-sharp. "While your attention was fixed on us, our infiltration teams disabled your system. Your weapon is offline." Zarek stared, breathing hard, his talons twitching. "You've lost." For a moment, the former High Executor stood frozen, chest heaving, lips quivering with suppressed fury. Then an animalistic scream ripped from his throat. He lunged. A blade slid from his sleeve, glinting wickedly in the low light. Thorn brought up his rifle just in time, the two crashing together in a flurry of strikes and counters. Fists and steel collided in brutal cadence. They slammed into a bank of consoles, sparks erupting as glass and circuits exploded around them. Zarek slashed, the blade carving a searing line across Thorn's ribs. He grunted, pain blooming, but answered with a savage elbow to the alien's throat. Zarek stumbled. Thorn pressed forward. A brutal kick to the knee, a crushing blow to the temple. Zarek collapsed, gasping, blood streaming from his mouth. The blade skittered away into the shadows. Thorn loomed over him, shoulders heaving, every breath a fight. Cuts and bruises covered his body, but his rifle remained steady, trained on the broken thing before him. Zarek looked up through narrowed, bleeding eyes. "Finish it," he spat, voice thick and wet. "Take your revenge, human." The air went still. Thorn stood in silence, finger tightening on the trigger. Every fiber in his body screamed to end it, to avenge the blood spilled, the pain inflicted, the children silenced by council decree. But then something shifted. Not Zarek. A flicker. Behind him. Thorn's eyes darted to the console, and what he saw froze his blood. The weapon core, a sphere of swirling black energy, was pulsing erratically. Crimson arcs of lightning snapped across its surface, licking at the walls. Warning glyphs blinked red. The hum, the low, deep-throated rumble, was rising, vibrating through the floor, building fast. Thorn's stomach sank. In the chaos of their struggle, a blade or stray bolt must have struck the containment housing. The core was destabilizing. They hadn't just disarmed the doomsday weapon. They'd broken its leash. The core's hum deepened, low, angry, unstoppable, building toward cataclysm. Commander Logan Carter stared into the swirling vortex of unstable energy, the arcs of black lightning crawling outward like fingers of doom. His mind raced. No time to disarm it. No time to evacuate the base. No time for anything but the truth he already knew. Only one path remained. A last, desperate gamble. He turned to the remnants of his strike team, bloodied, bruised, armor scorched and cracked, but still standing, still ready, still his. "Back to the ship," Logan ordered, voice raw with urgency. "All of you, get as far from here as possible." "But sir," Sergeant Hawkins stepped forward, eyes wide with disbelief. "What about you?" Logan met his gaze. A flicker of pain passed between them before a faint, tired smile touched his lips. "I'll stay," he said quietly. "Buy you time. Contain the blast if I can." Realization struck Hawkins like a gut punch. His protest died in his throat, replaced by helpless anguish. He started to argue, but Logan raised a trembling hand. "That's an order, Sergeant." For a long, painful second, no one moved. The hum of doom vibrated in their bones. Then, slowly, reluctantly, Hawkins nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's been an honor, sir," he whispered, saluting with aching pride. Logan returned it, his own vision blurring. "The honor was mine." One by one, the team filed out. Some clasped his hand. Others simply nodded, unable to speak. Each left a piece of themselves behind with him, until only Logan remained. Alone in the command center. Alone with death. He turned to face the dying weapon. The containment field was collapsing, the power core pulsing like a furious heart, black lightning surging across the walls, eating metal and light. Logan exhaled. He thought of Earth, of sun-drenched hills and quiet forests. He thought of his ship, the Indomitable, and the crew who had followed him through hell itself. He thought of the fallen, of the innocent child who had sparked a rebellion across the stars. And he smiled. "This is for you, kid," he whispered. He stepped toward the core. One man. Against annihilation. For Earth. For justice. For all of them. And then the world erupted. Light without shape. Thunder without sound. And Logan Carter was no more. You've reached the end of the story. If this tale moved you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you drop 888 in the comments, I'll heart every single one of them. Thanks for being part of this journey. Captain Logan Carter gave everything, so humanity could rise. If this story moved you, honor his sacrifice by hitting like, subscribing for more epic tales from the stars, and commenting 888, so we know you were here for the final stand. Until next time, stay sharp and never kneel.